we good? Are we good? Welcome to Building Legal and Sustainable DIY. I'm Mike Lawrence. I'm attorney for Silent Barn. I'm a member of the collective and have been representing Silent Barn on legal matters since 2013. I have a practice at Lawrence Law, which specializes in business and entertainment law. And tonight I'm monitoring this panel with these fine panelists here. They all run DIY spaces and come out of the DIY tradition. DIY lately is come under attack more than it ever has. It's also clear that it's needed more than ever before. We desperately need spaces to have young people perform and come up. We need kids to have places to connect and have places where they could get inspired. And this panel tonight, the purpose of this panel is to find out and learn from our panelists what they've done to start and run DIY spaces. So let's learn who these panelists are. Pooyan Aslani, right here, is a civil engineer by trade and a lover of cats. He is an adjunct professor at NYU's School of Engineering, where his favorite class is project control. Pooyan became involved with Sunnyvale in its infancy in 2014. The bar and music venue that had existed briefly under a different name had been shut down by the authorities. For the next 2 years, he was the main engine behind transitioning the old venue into a legal establishment. In addition to managing construction and permits, he became the engineer of record for Sunnyvale after he had to let go of the architect. These days, Pooyan takes a back seat and contributes to Sunnyvale in other ways, from accounting and portering to carpentry projects and renewing the TCO. He may soon train to be a bartender and will definitely wear a bow tie if he does end up behind the bar. Look mighty good. Welcome, Pooyan.
Thank you.
John Barclay is the owner of Bossa Nova Civic Club, white label yerba mate soda, and an organizer at Dance Liberation Network, an organization committed to the repeal of New York City cabaret no dancing law. He has been working in New York City nightlife for over a decade and was formerly involved with DIY venues 285 Kent and Trip House, amongst others. Welcome, John. Rachel Nelson is an artist, curator, political economist, and business owner who resides in Bushwick, Brooklyn. She co-founded Secret Project Robot, an artist-run art space, with her husband, Eric Tchaikovsky, in 2004. In 2013, they built, designed, and opened Happy Fun Hideaway, a bar that thrives by creating a true work family with strong support of the artist community. In 2015, they started Flowers for All Occasions, a cafe, gallery, bar that is about having a public space for discourse and art while providing jobs to artists. For her free time, Rachel went to graduate school studying international political economy and wrote her thesis on the relationship between the rise of regulatory capture within the tax system and the rise of oligarchs. I think that may be going on now, but I'm not quite sure.
It's relevant.
She is interested in the ways in which human relationships can mitigate the effects of unbridled capitalism on a community. She is currently working on the latest iteration of Secret Project Robot, which is a collaboration between artists and friends to create a sustainable art space. She also likes to paint really big flowers, flower paintings, neon plaid, and food found on pieces of cardboard. Welcome, Rachel. Adam Reich is founder of Shea Stadium, a concert venue, recording studio, and rehearsal space in Bushwick. Reich is Brooklyn born and raised and started Shea in '09 with childhood friends. Besides running a business, Reich is also a music producer, engineer, and has played guitar in the So-So Glows and Titus Andronicus. Shea Stadium recently conducted a highly successful Kickstarter campaign and are looking to relocate to a new event space. Welcome, Adam. And Anya Sapozhnikova.
Nope.
No?
Sapozhnikova.
Okay. Is the co-founder, managing partner, and creative director of the House of Yes. She cut her teeth in the event production, helping throw illegal warehouse parties in the mid-2000s when you could still get away with everything. Simultaneously, she was working full-time as a freelance high-end circus performer and live entertainment producer. Existing simultaneously on both sides of the spectrum for over a decade allowed her to connect with just about everyone doing alternative events as well as nightlife in our city. She thinks this understanding of the full gamut of nightlife in our city is key to making a venue work. Her belief, and therefore the ethos of House of Yes, is that a nightlife is one of the most important facets of our society. A lot of ideas get born here, a lot of cultural shifts incubate there, important dialogues happen, guards come down, and hearts open. The way she runs her business is geared towards creating a platform for arts and arts culture to evolve and a safe space for humans to come together and celebrate life. She would like to see nightlife and live entertainment move away from consumerist culture and go back to being a community-oriented culture. So, we'd like to welcome our panelists and thank them for coming. So the first part of the panel is going to be moderator driven. I'm going to be asking questions, running the full gamut of DIY life and legal matters. After about 40 minutes, we're going to turn it over to the audience for questions. And there's a mic here. At that time, you all can line up and ask our panelists questions. I think we're going to start with how to deal with authorities, since that seemed to get the most votes on a poll I put on Facebook. And I'll start by asking John, who has been deeply involved in nightlife for probably a decade or more. There have been a lot of instances with March, various venues running into problems with the police, Department of Buildings, and other agencies. What do you think is the best way to prevent that from happening?
Uh-oh. Is this gonna reach? No? This one?
Stay down easier than right.
Sure, yeah, let's do that.
Thank you, Fred.
Oh, also take it. Well, you guys can hear me. I don't know the best way to avoid March. My sort of take on the whole thing is, it's pretty much, with the way the system is set up right now, it's pretty much impossible to be fully legal. I've gone way out of my way to do everything I can to obey all the rules, and still have felt, very oppressed by the authorities in New York City. So I don't know the answer to that. We've gone through all the steps to do everything we can, and we are still the victim of these guys from time to time.
Is there a specific policy change you think would go a long ways into making things better?
Well, there's a lot of things. One thing, we recently had a town hall meeting at Market Hotel that Commend in the New York City Artists Coalition organized. And one of the things they asked of Department of Cultural Affairs was for transparency with the March program, because no one really knows how it works. They just show up with like a full counterterrorism raid force. It's insane. It's like, I don't know, 13 people or something, and they raid your spot and they write tickets for absolutely everything. If you guys don't know what it is, March is an interdepartmental task force that just comes in out of nowhere. Health department, I believe EPA. It's pretty crazy. FDNY, NYPD, Department of Buildings, State Liquor Authority, and they write tickets for everything. Most of the time that happens to you, you don't reopen. But sometimes you just lose all your profit for the year, which is what happened to us. But yeah, it's pretty devastating, and people are asking for transparency on that, and I agree with that notion.
Okay. Pooyan, so one of the things that typically comes up in March is the issue of cabaret licenses, and that also seems to be a very murky area where people don't know exactly how that's enforced. Do you think that there should be policy changes surrounding cabaret laws?
Yes. The problem I have, I'm an engineer. The issue I have with cabaret license is cabaret license being enforced by multiple agencies. Because if DOB, for instance, give you certificate of occupancy, or let's say you have a public assembly permit, still you may not be able to have dance on the floor. The question I have is, okay, structurally you are legal. You have a certificate of occupancy for having 150 people on the floor. So what else do you need to do to basically get a cabaret license from Department of Building? That is, to me, from perspective of civil engineer, I know that lawyers have argued that a lot in courts with that notion of what is dancing. But let's assume that you have a sport bar. And I'm sure that if they show NFL games, there are everybody jumping up and down. They do not consider that dancing, but if you have people over here standing and listening to music, they come over there and they interpret it as a matter of, you need a cabaret license. Because the frustration I have with DOB is, okay, what do I need to do from the perspective of legally? Do I need to make my floor thicker? But I have a certificate of occupancy and a public assembly of 150 people. I don't have to do anything else, but still, because it has to do with zoning, and then zoning has to change, sometimes it's kind of really, really unfair to demonstrate that. And sometimes, if let's say you're a developer, you can go and change the zoning. We are not in that category, and still. As an engineer, I have serious issue with the way that city interprets this issue of cabaret license. And that's the DOB part, and then later on you're going to basically deal with the Department of Consumer Affairs. And then you have to go back to community board, and then you have been in the community board, you're getting your liquor license, you know how hard that one is. And so basically, again, to John's point, the issue is not transparent. They do not say what do you need precisely to do this, A, B, C, D. Then, okay, you're good for whatever business you have. So that's my take on that.
All right. I think an issue we should probably address and start out with, that's a very clear-cut issue, is that of how much money does it actually take to start a DIY venue? Anya, do you have an idea or thought on that?
Well, which like how DIY? Like
so a legal DIY space.
Well, you have to be prepared to go at least twice over budget. We were going, so it's a ridiculous amount. So like House of Yes was made on a shoestring budget comparatively to the scale of what we're doing, and it was close to $2 million. We expected to be half of that, and we were about a year and a half delayed opening. That's how naive we were when we went for it. The previous two spaces, the first one I needed $3,000, and then I just kind of made it work. Second one was about $100,000 over the course of like 8 months. And that was all just kind of like pulled together very randomly. but yeah, like, I mean, we're pretty large, so but that's you know, when we talk to other venue owners in Manhattan, they're like appalled at how little money that is, but yeah, it gets pretty crazy. I mean, just the lawyer fees alone like the lawyer and the administrative fees alone were twice than what the whole previous venue was, and it was about, you know, our cap there, our legal capacity there was 250, and now we're at 650, so yeah, it's nuts. And twice as long, twice as much money than you think.
Okay. All
We
right.
raised like 4 or 5% of that on Kickstarter, which was great community building. But yeah, it was a lot of like loans and investors, stuff like that.
Okay. So Adam, you're sort of in the midst of.
Yeah, I mean, things have changed in the
Yeah.
last couple of days.
So now that you have a successful Kickstarter under your belt and you have the money, are you thinking like, all right, now what do I do, or do you have like a plan of what you need to spend money on? And
I mean, our situation's kind of totally different right now. We raised this money with the intent that we were going to be staying in a certain space, and now, you know, unfortunate change of events, plans have changed. The whole thing really sucks, but do we think that that's enough money to get us to another place? No way. Did we think that it was the amount of money necessary to bring our space that we, you know, have or will have for a little while longer up to code? Almost.
has there been an estimate? Have you estimated like how much you would need to take it all the way?
Well, I mean, like, just to get into the logistics of it, you know, our unique situation of being on a second floor kind of threw the potential costs into like a different stratosphere when you have to, you know, put in an elevator or something like that, as opposed to like if you're on the ground floor. I think had we been able to stick around, that would have been the biggest crossroads and like the biggest expense. But, you know, other than that, I mean, permits and stuff, I think everyone at the table would know better than me, considering that they've all been out the other side of it. You know, I'm not all the way there yet.
Yeah. And speaking of fundraisers, Kickstarters, you both have had successful Kickstarters. I mean, and you've at one point or another been somewhat underground. Do you think that that is a necessary prerequisite to having a successful fundraiser?
I think as a community space, it's always important to engage with your community, and when you don't know when the hell you're going to open again, it's great to let the people that care about you and that you care about to be able to get involved. So I was like, when I was running the Kickstarter for the third House of Yes, I was like, this is the most like spiritual experience with the internet I've ever had, because I was like directly, I don't know, it was just like super emotional. Just, you know, it's really hard to go from DIY to this like New York City legal venue thing, and to have, you know, hundreds of supporters like rooting you on, and then it just reminds you like how important it is what you're doing. And yeah, and then the money, like we raised $94,000, like that's a drop in the bucket of what we needed, but like that was really helpful when that bank loan was taking like 6 months longer to come in. So yeah, by all means do it. There's so many benefits.
Yeah, I mean, I think that without the Kickstarter, the future of Shea would be pretty bleak. Very, very bleak.
Yeah, I mean,
But now, you know, we have a chance.
Yeah, my thought is that, you know, for people in DIY, it's almost, you're almost not coming from a place of having a lot of money to sink into a endeavor right away. So the fact that it's almost, you have to start illegally in a certain sense, and
Yeah,
like,
I mean, starting a DIY venue, you know, if you're really going, you know, to the core of it, is basically coming up with the money for a PA and her first month rent and a security deposit, you know? Yeah. It's like if you really are trying to start a DIY space, you know? That's what you need, you know? And this is just in a whole other stratosphere of like, you know, costs and and stuff. I don't remember the exact numbers, but in the beginning of Shea, it was like basically just recording equipment, or just live sound equipment or whatever, because we sort of had we had a more like audio component end of things, because we were kind of a recording studio as well. I think or at least wanted to do that. Ended up things took a different turn. But yeah, I think that's probably what you need if you want to start a DIY space, but it's pretty hard to pull that off nowadays in the current climate of New York City, you know.
And Rachel, you kind of had a similar experience where you had a couple of ventures before the current iteration of Secret Project Robot. Are there rules of thumb you would tell people who are starting a DIY space that are trying to bridge the gap to something legal?
I mean, I think it's still possible to be legal without spending a ton of money, depending on the capacity of people you want. So anything that doesn't require public assembly, so 74 people or under, is like, Happy Fun isn't that big and it wasn't that expensive for us to open, and that was sort of our first foray into legalization. And we spent less than $50,000 initially opening that. We did a lot of the work ourselves, and we ended up, over the course of a year spending more money. But like to just get open, and I know that sounds like a lot of money, but that's within people's Kickstarter budgets if you have a supportive network of friends, or, I bartended for a decade and a half and saved all my money, and so did Eric. But, Flowers is the same thing, so just a beer and wine license doesn't hold that many people. I think the legal capacity is 37. So those types of places, depending on how big you want to go. Now, if you want to start getting into way bigger, it's going to get way more complicated. And this iteration of Secret Project Robot has definitely had much more. It's been a lot more of a process, because we're trying to be like a more legal space than Secret Project Robot ever has been. But even that has been, it's been a lot more money than I wanted to spend, but it's still within, for the third space, I think it's still within reason. And a lot of this stuff is just dealing with navigating city agencies, finding out, our place, we were lucky enough to find a place that was already a bar, already had like a lot of the, assembly stuff that it needed. So when you're looking for a space, this is the advice I would give, is if you can find a space that already has the certificate of occupancy you need, or if you don't want to be public assembly, all you need for your liquor license is use group 6, which is like a DOB function, which just basically means that you have to be a commercial space. So if you're just trying to open a bar that you can have sort of small shows in and stay under the radar, I think it's still really possible for people who are sort of striving for that type of space.
Yeah, just for the people that don't know, a certificate of occupancy is a certificate that every building has, and you have to have a certificate of occupancy to use the space in a business capacity. So most tenants, when they move into a building, they have to do some renovations, and doing any kind of meaningful renovations to an existing floor plan is going to require you to change the certificate of occupancy. So Rachel's suggestion to find a venue that already has a certificate of occupancy is huge in terms of not laying out expense, hiring expediters, and going through the city to fill out applications that could sometimes take months. So yeah.
I mean, I would estimate not having to change your C of O probably at the very least saves you like $150,000 at the very least.
Yeah.
And that's like being really like, small numbers of just like making
No delays.
Yeah, no delays, making just the basic changes that you have to do to get away with it. But just if you can, stay away from unless you want to go big and you have investors, try to avoid those spaces altogether, and it's a lot easier. You can also there's like other things people don't know, like letter of no objection is fine if you don't need to be a public assembly space. So there's different things around it if you're looking to do just a DIY space but be legal. There's little gray areas still, I think, that people can navigate that still make you a perfectly legal space.
And Rachel, you have.
Oh, I just wanted to add something. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I don't monopolize that.
That's okay. And then I'm not telling everyone to, go and do things illegally, but the way that we were able to get away with it for 5 years at their second incarnation is because we've got multiple inspections by the police and the fire department, or inspections by the fire department and police visits. But I think that they saw what we were doing with our daytime programming, and because they saw that most of our programming was classes, and we were actually making the streets safer by increasing traffic. And this, our first space was off of Mauser Street, which is this warehousey. Yeah, yeah, that's right. I live across the street from you. And so because it was total no, after 4 or 5 o'clock, there would be no one on the streets, and people get mugged there. I got mugged there twice, and before the space opened, and because we had all this traffic and all this arts programming and shoots and classes and whatever, I think that, and then they also saw that we were making a big effort. They saw that our scrappy little budget, we still splurged on that $5,000 fire door, and we had fire extinguishers, we had exit signs, all that stuff. They knew that we were nowhere near legal, but they saw that we were trying as hard as possible to be safe, and that our main objective wasn't to throw crazy raves until 8 in the morning. And I think being young and female was also maybe helpful. So that's what I would recommend, but don't go do that. don't go do that and then expect to apply for a liquor license later, because it will fuck you if you kind of operate illegally and then decide to switch later.
Yeah. Now, Rachel, you have a couple of different bars and places. Secret Project Robot is actually a non-profit, and your other entities are for-profit. How did you decide to go with one designation with Secret Project and the others a different?
Going on sort of what she was saying, we became a not-for-profit. We were founded in 2004 in a building called Monster Island. There was a whole group of us. There was a 15,000 square foot warehouse, and we were on the ground floor. And we had a big March thing and, whole thing. And our effort to become not-for-profit was to sort of show, look, we are trying to become part of a community. We do care about art and artists. We just have different, ideas of what that is. So our initial effort to become not-for-profit was just to sort of have some piece of paper to hand the authorities when they showed up. And also because you can apply for temporary beer and wine licenses, which helped us a lot with the 74th precinct, I think it was. And I ended up having a good rapport with with all the precincts actually we've been in. And so the not-for-profit was really helpful for that. And it wasn't so much a monetary thing. We didn't know rich people, so we didn't get a lot of money donated to us or anything like that. But it did have a specific, when the police come to the door and you're like, oh, hi, what are you doing? You say, hi, we're a not-for-profit, we're doing an art fundraiser, this is what's happening. And I always say for people, you have to have a story at the door. So you need to have, you need to rehearse a story for what's gonna happen if they do show up, because you don't want to just be slamming the door in anybody's face. That's just going to make it worse. So the not-for-profit essentially at first was just sort of a way to engage with the community and the local authorities, but it's grown into something that's become really important and sort of philosophically a part of who we are. But it's also great for receiving donations, grant writing, those types of things. But the new bar is LLC'd under a separate thing because it gets really tricky with the SLA, the IRS, and profits and partners and those types of things.
Cool. And is that the 3 places you have? Is it part of a strategy that maybe the for-profit entities are subsidizing the non-for-profit, or you just?
Yeah. So I guess Happy Fun we started basically because I worked at a bar from 18 until 30, and I was just really sick of working at a bar, so we started Happy Fun so that we could work at our own bar, I guess. And most of the money that initially, basically Happy Fun was started as a way to fund Secret Project Robot, because before that it was just us working our jobs. Eric worked as a brand person in an office, and he was funding it through his income. And Happy Fun made it so that we actually had this sort of epiphany where we were wow, if we actually are making money, we can do more to support the arts than if we're just trying to be this sort of not-for-profit thing. So it's been, for us, we provide jobs to artists, we do, we can put more money into projects from our own pocket or from happy funds. So yeah, it has been definitely like a philosophy to help fund art stuff.
Okay, all right. Moving on to leases, wondering if any of you have had particularly interesting experiences with leases in the ventures that you've undergone over the years.
I guess I can take the most.
Current events. So, I mean, I think a lot of people here probably know that, you know, we've been running our space as a, you know, full-blown DIY space for a long time. For about 8 years, a couple of months ago, we started getting visits from various city organizations. Long story short, we had to close for a while. We started raising funds to get our building up to code. And basically we're all set to file the paperwork until like about a week or two ago when our landlord denied our signature to move forward on the work, putting us in a weird situation with, you know, 2 years left on a lease. We obviously can't throw a show without permits. This has been made very clear to us, you know, by this point. And, you know, if you don't sign this paper, basically, you know, we can't do anything. Like, we have to stop paying you rent. The reason why they don't want to do it is because they want to open their own nightclub in our building. Our landlord, his son, is not Nabil. No, Nabil owns the paper box at 17 Meadow. Ahmed is our landlord. Ahmed's son, you know, wants to try his hand at the nightlife industry wherever he is, and yeah. And basically, for a while, we thought that, like, we knew about this for a second, and, you know, we were trying to come up with solutions for the two spaces to potentially coexist in harmony, you know, some way that we can still stay where we've obviously grown accustomed to being, like, this has been our spot for so long. And, I mean, we kind of came to the conclusion that there was no compromise. And we sort of just said to them, you know, well, then we got to stop paying rent. So, you know, they're going to be letting us out of our lease, and now, you know, we're back on the streets this summer, you know. See how that goes. But, yeah, I mean, even ironically, you know, with all this pressure from the city and everything that's been going on, for us, it was basically what kind of screwed everything up was like a personal decision. So it's like, you know, you can do anything right, you can do everything right with the city, you know, but obviously unless you own a building, you ultimately don't really have control over your own fate, you know. And weird shit happens with leases that you would never expect, I guess, is the summary of it, you know.
Based on your experience, though, is there anything in particular you would be looking for in your next space that you would want in the lease, or
in the lease specifically?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, there has to be something done with making, you know, with bringing like a building up to code, or to convert a space that maybe was industrial into something that you can use legally for, you know, a variety of events, you know. Somehow you have to come up with a way where, like, that's not the tenant's investment all the way, you know, because, like, I think that's what the problem is that landlords just own these buildings and they don't necessarily want to invest that kind of money into something when they can just turn around and rent it all the same, you know, in a very, like, objective business way, you know, like, we can get the same amount of rent from someone who doesn't have all these crazy ideas about how they want to turn their, you know, this concrete, you know, structure into a freak show, you know. So, I mean, I don't have a solution, obviously, but I think I think the big problem is that, you know, these things do require a certain investment, or like anytime there's like a conversion involved, it seems. Like Rachel was saying, if you find the right situation, you know, it's a totally different thing. But I think that's the big thing that's getting in the way. And, you know, unless you can put something in a lease that, you know, you can protect the investment that you make in someone else's building in some financial way, you know, then it's like really hard for people to just go ahead and just make that commitment, you know?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, a couple of things just from my experience I would add before we move on is that obviously if you're going to invest a lot of money in a new space, you want to have the term of the lease be as long as possible. If there's a renewal period, you want to have the renewal period. And then other things, one thing that's important is having a good guy clause, which allows you to leave before the end of the term and not pay, you know, through like 2015 or 2025. So those are
90 days, right?
yeah, with notice. So
Sometimes 6 months. And then, another thing is like concession periods. Request one for sure. We should have gotten a year. We only got 6 months because we were delusional. And but yeah, so that means that you don't have to pay rent while you're building out. And then I can't stress enough how important it is to invest in a good lawyer and a good architect, especially if you're going above the 74-person cap, because it's so complicated and you will have way too much to do to learn how to be a lawyer and architect while you're opening. So that will save you so much money.
Also, I would just add, if you're signing a lease, when you're signing the lease, make sure that state as closely what you want to do with that space. If you're trying to be sort of DIY still, because like if you say you're going to open an art gallery and you start throwing illegal parties, it's grounds for eviction. Like that, it is an actual legal document, and if they don't like it or if they realize that they can get more money because people want to do that, they can kick you out. So you have to be pretty specific. If you're opening a bar, you have to make sure that, first of all, that the lease is under your LLC or your incorporation's name, but you also need to make sure that the use on your lease is stating what you actually want to do with the space. And we always put in backup clauses like bar, gallery, we try to do like 5 different things just in case we fail and we still want to keep the space, but just like, you know, it's sort of making sure that you do those things. It's like when you're signing a lease, it's kind of like it's a real document, you know?
thank you. All right, so you're at the point where you all sign this new lease for a new space. Maybe you go out to a far reach area of the city that no one's ever heard before, and you're part of now the gentrifying force. What do you have a duty to cater to everyone in the community? Do any of you have initiatives to be inclusive?
So yeah, first of all, if we were not involved in the community with the second venue, we would have been shut down a long, long time ago. And we didn't have a school. We have one school next to us. They weren't interested in being involved in this because they didn't have the staffing to deal with us wanting to help. But yeah, just, you know, doing stuff like cleaning up your street, like the authorities notice that kind of stuff, like starting a community garden next door because you want a place to hang out and you're not in your stressed out DIY space where there's just like, it gets intense. Like doing little things like that is really important. I'm working on a kind of an ambitious thing where I'm working on getting arts into schools in our neighborhood, and it's like really impossible. You can call schools all you want, and there's just not enough staffing there because all the staff is like cops, security, and like a few teachers. You have to get in through the PTA or through a teacher that you know or through a church group. And I think it's really important because it's kind of like, well, it's the only thing I can think of that we can do, because then we have the resources and it's easy for us to go into the schools, and then you're building that relationship with the community, and then you're knowing the people in your community board firsthand, and they might not understand what you're doing with the rest of your time, but they see that you care and that you're involved, and I think it is our responsibility as gentrifiers to do things that are easy to us, like make art with kids here and there.
Right, if no one else has anything to add,
Is that one more? Oh.
Sorry, you're like in the middle.
Yeah, Bermuda Triangle here. I think the easiest way to sort of diversify, you know, is like a pretty white dude, like coming into a neighborhood like Bushwick and opening up a place. It's the easiest way to make my bar not full of people who look exactly like me is to hire people that, you know, sort of reflect the neighborhood to a degree, and also entertainment. I notice when we have nights that is like, you know, like 4, you know, straight white dude DJs, which is really, really easy to do. We see that a lot, get a lot of proposals for that. We have a crowd that is like overwhelmingly straight white dudes just sort of like bobbing their heads, but complaining about the sound and whatnot. But when we have lineups and staff or promoters or whatever that are a little more diverse, we always see that reflected in the crowd, and we're always, you know, pleased with the results, to say the least.
Yeah. I guess from the Sunnyvale point of view, I mean, all those points that everybody mentioned, we at Sunnyvale didn't have the luxury of having a CFO. The building didn't have anything, and we inherited a lease that immediately when I got involved, we were sued by multiple landlords. We have a sublease at Sunnyvale. So going through that, it was very difficult for us to come up with a solution to go forward, even to get liquor license, and then later on certificate of occupancy. I am a libertarian socialist. The only way I thought that we can handle this issue was to come up with a way, although we are not non-for-profit, but we have 16 partners at Sunnyvale. And I always take pride of that so many people basically chipped in somehow to basically help us to get established. And that was my experience doing that. And then from the other issue that I have personally, I have the issue, I guess, with authority. I mean, John was talking about that. I'm the problematic partner. I mean, my chief negotiator, or I guess partner negotiator, John, is sitting over there. He takes care of all our negotiations with authorities. When authorities come over there, John is the first person going out and deal with them, because as you mentioned, that you have to have your story. And sometimes for me, it's very difficult to negotiate, because I feel that the effort that we have spent, and we are legal, but still they come and find something. I'm sure that they can walk in any environment and find something wrong. And that's not a difficult task. But John is basically the negotiator from Sunnyvale, always dealing with that. But again, yes, our dealing with the community was, we are extremely diverse group of partners. Me, myself included, I'm coming from Middle East, so we have 15 other partners, and we thought that would be the only way, because the amount of time and hours we spent, because we couldn't afford to hire people, and the number of hours my partners spent at Sunnyvale from the mopping the floor and being a bartender without collecting their tips, because they were partners and we needed money, so they donated the money to Sunnyvale. So we spent a lot of personal hours, and 5 or 6 of us that were heavily involved, and I have to publicly acknowledge everybody's effort at Sunnyvale.
That's an important point. Employment, different places tackle it in different ways. Rachel, you've had a few venues and a few people pass through and work at different ones. Do you have a rules of thumb when it comes to labor and, you know, sharing the workload with partners?
I'm probably like the first person to ask, because I always like hire like people who I think are lovely people and not always the best at their job, but they grow into it. But I always say that we hire artists first and servers, bartenders second. So for me, it's about finding people who often really need the work, They are on tour, so they can't hold down jobs in other places, or people who, you know, I guess like, yeah, I'm not like the best person to ask about like the best way to hire people, other than to say like you can train people to do anything eventually. When we opened Happy Fun, not a single person had ever bartended before except for one. Except for, yeah, me and one other person. But I think like for us, it's just been like about growing everything together. And we sort of just have like, sometimes the business suffers a little for that, but I think it's been a positive thing in the end because we've created like a pretty strong community, and we spend, like all of the staff is like sort of family, like we spend a lot of time together.
Anya, could you speak, can you speak to how having employees affects administratively how an operation is run, or do you have thoughts on labor generally?
It's tricky because in the beginning you don't really know what positions you need to have covered, especially when you grow and evolve how your business is. And in the first year, we hired this really lovely guy to be our booking manager, and then 2 months in, we were like, wow, this is completely not what we expected our venue to do or be or act like. So I think it's really important to learn from your venue and not be so rigid. Malleability is very, very important. And malleability in our employees is also extremely important. People that are rigid do not last very long because it's such a labor of love, and it's I think the difference between like a DIY venue versus a like something that like Tower Group is doing, like I have the chops, I have the capital, I'm gonna open a club, versus like something what we're doing, which has grown, is that when you have a venue that's an organism, it'll always want to live. Like a little live thing, you could like chop off its limbs and it's still going to keep like plugging along for a while, versus a mechanism or machine that's going to want to break all the time. And I think it's really important to think of that when you're hiring, to people who want to be a part of the bigger thing, because it'll take a while for you to get people on salary. The hours will be really crazy, and your job is not going to be very well defined, and you have to be able to kind of handle that, like emotionally, physically, mentally. And one thing I always tell all of my employees, all of my new hires, is that it's up to them to put down their own boundaries, because us as frazzled business owners who are overworked and overwhelmed, and sometimes we look like we're handling it in stride, but we're always kind of freaking out just a little bit somewhere in there. And it's important for your employees to know that just because their boss is asking them to do something, that means that they can always say no. And because everyone is so dedicated and so committed, people run themselves into the ground, and that's when things break. So, and you won't always have the awareness or the time to check in with everyone. So just really trusting them on taking care of themselves and taking care of each other, and really running it as a family, I think is super, super key.
Okay. Let's move on to fire safety. That's an issue that's been in the news recently. I think we all are committed to having safe spaces in DIY. I read an interesting fact about Sunnyvale, Pooyan, about some expensive paint that you guys used to sort of deal with fire safety. Do you want to go into that?
Sure, it's part of the public assembly for us. I mean, it's the funny part of the, I guess, issue was our architect tried to use basically a trial and error system with DOB. And that means that he was basically going to see a plan examiner, and plan examiner says something, he would come and tell me verbally, and each time he was charging us for those times that he's going to DOB. So he had a serious interest of not basically closing the file for me, for us. And then at some point he came to us and said that you need to have a sprinkler system or sheetrock the entire ceiling. And I said, it's a Sunnyvale, it's a beautiful building. It's a very old building. It was built in late 19th century. And we partners that sat together and we really hated the idea of sheetrock in the entire floor. And then DOB was adamant that we have to fireproof somehow the ceiling. So this is obviously here, for instance, sheetrock. So, and for me, it was basically took us a lot of time to figure out what would be the second option, which was basically finding intumescent paint. And that was the only part that basically we had to do to get the inspection done. So we had to find a place, and we ended up basically paying $20,000 to paint that ceiling, which is a special paint, fireproof paint, to basically preserve the wood that we had. Although I know that people come to Sunnyvale and sometimes the issue of reflecting lights, we have an issue, and I get that from everybody, including my partners, and sometimes people come, oh, Sunnyvale is very bright. But the problem is we had to find that white color intumescent paint for the roof, the ceiling. So we couldn't do anything about that. That was basically put on us by DOB, which is, by all means, it's the right thing to do. I'm not arguing that.
Are there any specific things any of you do to address fire safety in addition?
Yeah, it's the most difficult thing that we have come across opening is the fire alarm is insane. Like, get your fire alarm process started as soon as possible. I don't know if it's as extreme with smaller venues. So anything beyond 74, like, that is the absolute first thing you should start dealing with as soon as your plans are approved. And then, fun fact, so my partner's family, they own Cafe Mogador in the city. So after 37 years in operation, they were like, hey, the fire law has changed, now you have to build a wall in the middle of your restaurant. So when you think you're out of the woods, you aren't. So that's something to look forward to. But yeah, it's just endless, and good architect, good lawyer, once again.
Yeah, I'll just throw in a couple rules of thumb. Means of egress for fire inspections is always important. You want to always have clear exits. Extension cords usually are a big issue with fires being started. And combustible materials you want to have stored in safe places, just as a rule of thumb. It's just the most common ways that fires happen in spaces.
And there's also if you call 311, they can send these fire pre-inspectors. I don't know what they're called, but they come from the fire department and they help you. They'll do walkthroughs that don't reflect on your actual inspection, and they'll tell you if something is a red flag, and that's free.
Yeah. So I think we touched on dealing with authorities earlier, but I want to sort of deal not just with the policy, but the police show up at your DIY venue. Is there a protocol that you guys have to deal with those situations? Is it every situation is unique? Can any of you expand on that?
Well, I think that we've always, it's always kind of the protocol for us, if the cops came, to obviously, you put all the alcohol away immediately, you insist that it's a private function. The cops care a lot about whether the distinction, probably less so now than before, but we were always a recording studio. We had recorded bands, we had band rehearsals, so for us it was always, we're having this event, this is the space that we use for something different, but tonight we're having a show, which didn't really work as well once we started having more and more shows, and the sort of neighborhood got more and more condensed. But yeah, definitely be prepared to have a story. You definitely don't want to just be like, oh, I don't know, you want to really be surprised that what you're doing is wrong.
What if What if the police show up and they're like, we want to see what's going on in there? Like, what would be your response, typically?
Deny, right?
So we always had this opposite policy at Secret Project Robot. which will be different now that we're becoming like a more official space. But the police will come in. You're always doing something wrong. You don't have any rights. So like you can save the rights for after you get arrested and you have to hire a lawyer, but like when they come, don't think that like certain things that you think are true. So for like that they can't come in. Like, cause if they want to, they will. And if you don't let them in, they might call their buddies the FDNY and they might have them come in, and they can always come in, and they can actually take your door off and come in. And then they can put a padlock on your door so you can't go back in. So our philosophy was always basically to be really, really friendly. Talk to them like you would speak to your girlfriend or boyfriend's father. Like, try to be buddy with them. I always did the door, so my thing was always like, oh, it was just like a really long night, I'm so sorry. And usually they didn't act, like the few times that they showed up at our old space on Melrose Street, they actually didn't come in. When they did come in, I mean, we sort of had like a protocol, you know, like you tell this person and this person tells this person. But, okay, this is like a little like sexist, but like cute girls work. It does. It's like, and just like sort of like, we always let them in, and like, actually I have to say they like always just left. And that was really lucky of us, but it was, I think, because like our manner at the time of like entry was like very like, yeah, of course, if like you want to come in, no big deal. You know, it's a crazy space, we're an art space. And that was always our philosophy. I know it's like not everybody's philosophy, but like you do not want to make them mad because they will keep coming back. So that was always our philosophy at Super Punch Robot.
Yeah, I think that they always want to sort of use as leverage that they can always up the ante. You know, I mean, March is something that even local cops will always dangle. You know, be like, take care of this now before, you know, you get marched, you know, kind of thing. So yeah, I think I mean, I definitely agree that you want to be as conversational and polite, as respectful as possible, and, you know, just kind of hope for the best. But, you know, if you just put up, I don't know, I guess you just want to be as real as possible with what you're doing.
And then once you're open, the minute like off-duty cops or policemen come in, or policemen or FDNY people come in, you want to be as friendly with them as possible and become friends with them. I have a stack of cards of FDNY people from my neighborhood and beyond who just like to go there, and it's just, we haven't had to use that yet, but I think that like, you know, they go and they're like, oh, I saw this amazing art show or this crazy like aerial show, and it was so much fun, and it's at this place called House of Yes, so they will be, and then on top of that, you're really nice to them. They will not, you know, do the worst thing possible that they can do to you. They will, you know, I mean, they're still going to do their job, but the degree to which they'll do their job sometimes varies just how nice you are.
Yeah, just to echo what someone said, I forgot, but they do whatever they want to. This whole thing, we like see all this stuff on YouTube where like you can like, you know, like own the situation by knowing their rights is, I don't know if that happens someplace in this country, but definitely not in Brooklyn. They have written me like the craziest tickets that are like the complete opposite of the truth. And I tell them I got a ticket once for not having liability insurance. And I'm like, first off, I have liability insurance, and secondly, nobody asked me if I had it. And they're like, oh, well, tell them in court. So you can like defend yourself, you know, do like the clever know your rights thing that works in that, you know, that works in the judicial system perhaps. But when they show up, they do whatever the fuck they want to. So what I always do is I just talk with like a fake Long Island cop accent, and I'm really nice and sort of firm with them, like, hey guys, how's it going? What can I help you with? I'm the owner. And they're usually nice. What they're looking for, in my experience, is for someone to, like escalate the situation. They want you to be a dick to them, or be like, I know my rights. and then they can like step it up a notch and just totally fuck you over. But yeah, in my experience, I don't know anyone that's fared well from knowing the law. It's always been like you rub their backs and then you hire a lawyer or be clever after the fact, unfortunately.
Get the badge number and anything that you have going on. Like we had in our soft opening, we had a temporary liquor license, and they came in and shut the party down to 2 and told me that the liquor license that I had on the wall was photoshopped. It was like blood, sweat, and tears, right? I was appalled, and I really wanted to slap somebody, but instead I said, "Here's my card. We will discuss this tomorrow." It wasn't like a tremendous amount of money being lost that night, getting shut down at 2 versus ending at 4. So you pick your battles, and but I made sure I had all of the names and badge numbers of everyone who was involved in the situation. And then the next day I went to the precinct in person, and because we've had countless meetings with the precinct explaining to them what we're doing and when we're going to be doing that, because we've had a lot of starts and stops opening, and so we always kept them updated, and we addressed that situation later, and I think that was better than trying to address it at 2 in the morning. And also making sure that they have your personal number, because sometimes there might be an issue, like a complaint from the neighborhood, and you'd much rather them call you than to come like see the issue in person, because sometimes, not always, but there's a slight chance that they, just by you being responsive, they maybe won't show up, but who knows.
Okay, thank you. I think we're gonna take it to the Q&A now. If anyone has any questions, feel free to step up to the mic and let us know who you're addressing the question to.
Yeah, I think it's relevant to most of you guys. To what degree do you need to have a security guard who knows the local detectives, or have a partner who's on the city council to survive? Various sort of inside information or whatever that's allowed you to get away with it, and then all of a sudden, one day it stops. And also on that topic, it's what sort of recently happened that changed everything? Was it the ghost ship fire in Oakland? Did all of a sudden detectives who were totally cool with this for years just say, "Oh, now we're going to go city by city"? And yeah.
I think the timing would definitely indicate that, at least in Shea's personal situation.
But we've always tried to, everyone that we've hired to do security at Shea, I think, has lived walking distance from the venue. This Walker, who's been doing the downstairs for us for a really long time, has always had a really good rapport with the cops. Ultimately, obviously, that didn't get us out of trouble, but I think that, for years we were able to do stuff that maybe we wouldn't have been able to do if we didn't have someone your security person is the first, that's your first line of defense, essentially, against someone that's gonna come by. So, you want to make sure that person is aware of his surroundings and aware of the community and knows at least a couple of local cops and firefighters and stuff like that for sure.
I think especially with a permitting application process, it used to be that you could know a guy who knows a guy, or you would hire an architect based on how sleazy in there they were, but that's not the case anymore. So everything is automated and getting more and more so. So you can't really get away with it. We started our application process for the third incarnation of the venue right when it was becoming automated, and boy was it different than we expected because of some of the connections that we thought we had. I think that having good security is, licensed good security is absolutely key, and yeah, just being friendly. It's we're not trying to be scumbags doing dangerous things. Our intentions are good, and do your best. If it's small, you can maybe, I'm not telling you to cut corners, but just keep it, I think the fire code is the most important part, right? Because that's actually the safety. That's when people could die or get seriously injured. So just being as open and friendly and just nice, and you know, not doing things that you know are like dangerous and just don't do that.
Thanks.
Well, actually, legally, you're obligated to have security guard, licensed security guard every day. And
Does that person's relationship with the local detectives matter?
No.
Like, do they ever get heads up?
no, I guess I'm just saying because I have gone through that. This is, I guess, another cost for people that they want to open, and we are going through that actually. In fact, myself last weekend I went to take the security guard license. And when you open a business, you realize that there are certain things that you need to have, like a POH, certificate of food handling. The security is another one. I guess you have to go through the state to get a license. I don't think the relationship matters. First of all, the state recognized security guard as a profession, so you need to have a license. So the first thing they ask technically is the person is licensed or not. And after that, I guess it depends how you carry yourself and deal with the situation. But first, if you don't have a licensed security guard, you are in a bad position. Again, you're at the mercy of interpretation of the police officer.
Also, maybe get a fire guard license. It's really cheap. It's like $50.
Yeah.
It's a class that you take. It's really easy. Do that, you know. Then that's like proof that you care about safety handling.
Thanks.
Hey, how's it going? So the short version of this question is, how do you deal with trolls? The longer version to that is, do you in your various venues have personal politics, or does the space itself have politics that you kind of promote out into the world that can attract attention from certain individuals? What I'm thinking in some of my context, we're trying to open up kind of a community gym, self-defense classes, aerobics, yoga, skill sharing, just kind of accessible community education, and we're kind of pretty open with our politics about it. I mean, we have a safer spaces policy, we use words like feminism, which is scary to a lot of people out there, I suppose, and we're kind of concerned about what attention that attracts and what, you know, half the reason we're talking about even going legal is because, you know, since Ghost Ship, there's been a lot of calls from alt-right individuals or like well-intentioned people calling the state to say a venue is unsafe, for X, Y, and Z reason. So yeah, I just want to know if y'all had any experience with that, just in any way.
So the magic word, sentence is, what can I do better? Instead of arguing, you don't know where these people are coming from, and as a community space, it's kind of your responsibility to listen to the community, right? So that means that you're going to get a lot of feedback, and some of it will be negative, right? Most people don't go out of their way to give positive feedback. And a lot of it is going to be aggressively stated, but really valid stuff that maybe you haven't thought about. And so just starting your retort with, how can I do better? Instead of, well, I did X, Y, and Z, why are you attacking me? Might be the best way to just have that as their blanket policy.
I mean, I definitely agree with that. That's the route to take, because eventually you kind of have to disarm their argument to a point. You know, it's like, well, you know, you can keep saying the same thing over and over, but if you're not offering a solution to the problem that you started, then it's really difficult to do anything about it, and then you're just like kind of hating for the sake of hating something, you know.
Well, I guess part of the question too, has it ever kind of directly affected your business model or the way that you function? You know, someone called the state for a particular reason. They didn't confront you, they just got pissed off at a night and they just called someone up and gave y'all.
We had someone stalk a staff member once. That was pretty weird. Someone who, maybe her first night working, was doing the door, and someone came to the show, and came back a few days later, and you know, started bringing flowers for her and stuff, and it got to the point that like she was really like threatened, and she had to stop working at Shea for a while. Luckily, like she came back, and the situation was kind of diffused, but he came to shows like trying to look for her and stuff, and you know, I think all of us were just trying to do our best to not escalate the situation, you know, just stay on the facts, you know, don't go too far off in rhetoric or to try to debate them, or just like it has to be tangible, you know, it has to be like something that you can explain, like concrete. And eventually I think he got the message and stopped coming around.
All right, so I'm gonna call like a 5-minute rule. If the questions could be as short as possible, and we'll just ask one panelist to address it so we could quickly move through.
Hi. So I just wanted to know if we could like talk a little bit more about gentrification. Sorry. If we could talk a little bit more about gentrification. You know, specifically about. I was just wondering if you guys have ever had experiences like partnering with local tenant organizations. Because I think, I mean, obviously, like you guys are businesses, but there's a lot of solidarity and a lot of potential there. But also about just like diffusing the whiteness within like DIY spaces, like outside of just like, you know, tonight is like Black Club Night or tonight is a queer club night. Like, you know, like really making an effort to make it inclusive for those around.
I guess from the Sunnyvale point of view, I'm kind of sensitive about that subject, and I think in some extent we have tried it. We have a basically kind of active policy. I mean, partners' ethnicity obviously is very diverse. From the perspective of shows that we are basically accepting, we have multiple people that we are trying. I agree with you that it cannot be a cliche somehow to just demonstrate that from the perspective of employees you hire, and the way that you have to be kind of cautious about what image you want to carry, and then how do you demonstrate that sort of assessment within your, I guess, operation. And at Sunnyvale, I think we have taken that matter kind of seriously, and we are really, really addressing that. Well, what I guess your point is, how would a business assess that demonstrate that they are sensitive about that topic?
No.
Quick.
So we always make an effort to hire a diverse set of DJs and performers. We always have at least one woman, or try to as hard as we can, on the DJ lineup. Our performers you'll see at night are super diverse. A lot of queer, trans, POC people, just as far as different body types. You know, we're a nightclub, and so you'll see our performers are very different than what you see at Lavo, which are look like Barbie dolls, which is great too. We have those too, but that's really important. And then for us, because we have so many artists, we've been really making a solid effort to get arts into schools. And I'm happy to talk after if you have really specific suggestions.
My question is about basically something that you said about getting a lease in a space where a landlord is resistant to taking sort of this, or that it would take an extra effort to take this sort of concrete, you know, industry space and turn it into something. Is there, besides aesthetic and maybe even cost, is there like a main reason why you would seek that out as opposed to like a retail space that's sort of like off the beaten path where there hasn't been a tenant in a long time, maybe try to get into a space like that instead? Is there a reason why you would take one over the other, the industrial over the retail or the other way around? And this is for you.
Yeah, so I think everybody will probably say at the table a lot to do with our spaces is noise. So the reason why a lot of us seek out industrial spaces first is because we can be loud. And when you're loud, you want to you're trying to basically not get noise complaints. So seeking out a lease is often in like an industrial space, you have less neighbors is probably the first answer. There's a lot of easier ways to seek out a retail space, and it just really depends on what you're going to do. But if you want to make a really crazy space, like to what he's saying, like if you want to go real crazy, like it doesn't mean just because it's a retail space the landlord's going to be down for that either. It depends really on the lease and the landlord. But generally all of us try to end up in like single story or industrial spaces so that we don't get noise complaints from the left, right, and upstairs, you know?
So Is there anything other than donating to a Kickstarter that the average showgoer can do to help stop venues from shutting down or help new ones show up for people who don't have the time or money to be behind the scenes at one of these venues?
I think the most important thing anyone can do right now is sort of try to get involved politically with these issues, because there is nothing right now protecting any of these venues. Any of these places can come in and get shut down any day. The guy talked about like the alt-right trolls or whatever, you know. I can walk into any space and I can point out 15 things that are completely illegal. Dancing is illegal in like 99.9% of all venues. They can shut you down for that. They can shut you down for dancing in a coffee shop, like padlock your front door for that. There's just like, it goes on. There's a surplus of things that they can use to shut you down. And just because they're not enforcing it right now, which they are picking up again, doesn't mean everybody's safe right now. All we need is another, more conservative regime in, let's say, the state liquor authority. It could be a local rookie beat cop that doesn't like you and he shuts you down. But we have seen that there are a few people in New York City government that are interested in what we have to say. They do think that, art and nightlife matters to some degree. So I think if we continue to put pressure on them, they are going to be forced to do something about it. They have acknowledged there's a problem. The mayor has acknowledged there's a problem. His office just came out with some report, like on the music industry or whatever, and the results are pretty horrific. Every place is shutting down. It's impossible to stay open right now. So we have to sort of like, in my opinion, humiliate our city, who is like so proud of how they like to brag about how we're the cultural capital of the world, but at the same time we're one of the worst cities that I'm aware of to be an artist, to be a musician. We have to hold them accountable for that.
Are there any names or organizations that you would throw out for people to look up or get involved in about these issues?
Community board meetings. Community board meetings. Open to anyone.
Sure. I mean, I'm involved with an organization called the Dance Liberation Network. We just met with the city's attorneys. They're supposedly drafting something to repeal cabaret law, but they're not going to do it if we don't keep the pressure up. There's a city council member who deals with part of Bushwick, Raphael Espinal, who's been great, New York City Artists Coalition. There's a number of organizations, but the big thing is that we got to just stop like complaining on Facebook over and over and over again. It does nothing at all. We have to start pressuring the city to do something about it.
Thank you. I think this is going to be the last question.
So why are politicians kind of keeping these anti-DIY spaces on the books? Like, why are they sending in basically like anti-terrorism units? Like, are they actually concerned about public safety, or are they just like trying to collect a lot of fees, or just worried about countercultural activities?
I'm sure we can all speak to that.
They don't really know. If you talk to, let's say, we just went to, talk to the city's attorneys, you talk to NYPD, you talk to DOB, State Liquor Authority, they're all so confused about what it is they're doing. The thing is, there's like so many departments, and they're all trying to get paid. They're all trying to justify their paychecks. They're trying to keep busy to a degree. So it's like this feeding frenzy to sort of like attack all of these spaces, and they don't really know why they're doing it. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they're just mean people or greedy people. But it's turned into this, you know, some sort of bureaucratic hell machine that is just, it can't stop feeding itself. But I mean, we do know that they've always gone after subculture. Like right now, our city is so, I just came from a community board meeting, and the guy who was putting forth, you know, he's asking, his space was in the Edge condominium, like the mega hell condos on the water in Williamsburg. And he was requesting, you know, permission to host music. And they're like, well, what kind of music? And he's like, jazz, definitely not hip hop or anything rowdy like that. Which is like insane that you can say something like that and get away with it in a public meeting. But the thing is they destroyed the lives of jazz musicians at the time it was happening. They destroyed them. They ran them out of the country. They jailed them. They barred them from performing. They shut all the venues down. And now we're so proud. The city's so proud of its jazz heritage. The same thing is happening now with, you know, whether it's hip hop or dance hall, techno, whatever bullshit. They're destroying it, and in 20 years there'll be murals of all of us, and they'll pretend like they were trying to foster it. I forget what
I meant. Okay, so we're gonna wrap up here. So three things I took from the meeting. We definitely have to pressure our politicians to change policy. We have to address safety in DIY, and we have to engage the community. That's how DIY spaces stay vital and stay true to the mission that they have. I'm just going to ask quickly if each of you have like one insight from the meeting, and then we'll wrap up.
Well, I guess the insight that I have to say that from our end, I guess, what I as a kind of a business owner, I would like the city to basically offer us is some sort of a transparency, and then definitely we try to have, we try to be legal. It's not that we are inherently we're gonna fight the system. At the same time, we want to have certain level of, I guess, tolerance from the city to understand the type of business we have, and that's basically, I guess, the minimum I would really like the city comes forward and demonstrate those type of transparency, that people understand it and that they can follow it, because it's very convoluted and complicated situation, and you go to, yes, 5 different people in one department, you get 5 different answers.
I'll go with this one. Yeah, I guess I would just like to reiterate that we have to organize now. There's nothing protecting any of us, so I would say, you know, either start supporting, start getting involved, or prepare to, you know, spend your nights at artisanal grilled cheese bars.
I know it's like a dirty word amongst our world, but like lobbyists are the people who actually do this for a living, and actually, like, I'm too busy, but I've thought for a while, we've thought like if all of us put our money into hiring a lobbyist, that's the people who the politicians actually listen to. And so it's just a thought out there, like the lobbyists have a bad word from Washington, but in like the history of politics, they were actually meant to be representatives of groups where we can't all go do something, but we hire somebody who can afford to speak for us. So just going on John's sort of thought, it's like, this isn't really like, there's not that much we can do as individuals anymore to move the dial. We have to show ourselves as a united constituency that actually matters to politicians, that we can get them elected, we can get them not elected. Because we've not mattered for a really long time. They thought we were sort of disposable. They thought we were just people who would go away and start another space they could shut down. But if we're united as people who actually have power, money, and votes, they will actually have to start listening.
Definitely. I think we need to just take things to a point where the city agencies can't use these gray areas as leverage against artists, you know. there needs to be like, if there needs to be a more concrete system. We've somehow managed to standardize almost everything in society, but this is like something that no one is taking really any great steps or effort to happen. I think that all of us involved and people who want to get involved in this sort of stuff would really appreciate just like set up a set of guidelines to follow, you know? If there was a path that was clear, I think a lot more people would feel comfortable taking it, and I think that we would all benefit as a result, because this world would be much more diverse as a result of it, you know, to give more people the opportunity to do these things, and the only way to do that is to get involved on a political level.
I think sticking together and having these kinds of things and, you know, panels and just being available to, like, I think that if it wasn't for our ability to be super DIY, we would not be where we are now as a venue, and it just would never have happened. And to be, you know, for everyone who's gotten there to be connected, and then to also be available as a resource to the people that are just starting out, I think is hugely important. And then once we're together, then we can do all these cool things. I think it's all going to be okay, right?
All right, well, thank you guys for coming tonight, and thank you to our panelists for enlightening us with your wisdom. And stay tuned for the bands we have tonight: Henry Flower, Hiccup, and Hey Baby. I'd like to give a hand to you guys, the audience. I have a cheat sheet, which I forgot to bring up here, but if you see me around, you could bug me for it. It's a one-pager with just some legal bullet points in case you're interested. So.
Thank you.
That was like way longer than I thought. It's cool. An hour 26. Feature length.
Where is this going to go? Michael,